There's a version of you that's going extinct right now. The version who could have learned that language, written that book, built that body, started that business, loved that person. That version dies a little more every day you say tomorrow. And here's the devastating part. You don't notice, because extinction doesn't announce itself. It just quietly happens while you're scrolling, while you're waiting for motivation, while you're telling yourself you'll start when you're ready. The boy in this story watched himself go extinct for 16 years, until one conversation made him realize there is no ready. There's only now or never. And never is where most people's dreams go to die. Now, I want you to understand something right from the start. This video isn't another productivity hack or time management system. It's not about waking up at 5 a.m. or optimizing every minute of your day or turning yourself into some kind of efficiency machine. This is the story of how one person's relationship with time transformed everything. Not because he learned to do more, but because he learned to see time differently. And if you've ever called yourself lazy, if you've ever felt like you're wasting your life but can't seem to change, if you've ever looked back on a week or a month or a year and wondered where it all went, this story will show you something most people never understand. Laziness isn't a character flaw. It's a symptom. It's a symptom of not knowing what your time is actually worth. And once you truly see the value of your hours, discipline becomes effortless, motivation becomes unnecessary, and action becomes inevitable. You'll walk away understanding why using time wisely isn't about grinding or hustling. It's about respecting the one resource you can never earn back. So let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was 16 years old, and if you asked anyone who knew him, they'd all say the same thing. Nice kid, smart enough, but lazy. Not destructively lazy, not the kind of lazy where he was failing out of school or getting into trouble, just unmotivated. Content. The kind of kid who did the bare minimum and seemed perfectly happy doing it. He'd show up to class, get decent grades without really trying, and then go home and disappear into his room. Gaming, scrolling, watching YouTube videos about people living lives he'd never live. Living vicariously through screens instead of actually living. His mom would knock on his door around dinner time. "Marcus, you coming down to eat?" And he'd say, yeah, in a minute. And she'd sigh and walk away. His dad had long ago given up on the "what are you gonna do with your life" conversations. They'd tried everything. Encouragement, consequences, lectures. Nothing worked. Because Marcus wasn't rebelling. He wasn't angry or depressed. He was just paused, stuck, but comfortable in the stuckness. Meanwhile, his friends were moving forward. His best friend Jake got a summer job at a bike shop, learning mechanics, making money, building something. His classmate Sarah was volunteering at the animal shelter, figuring out she wanted to be a veterinarian. Even his younger sister was learning to code, building websites for fun. Everyone around Marcus was growing, changing, becoming someone. And Marcus was just existing, drifting through his days like he had all the time in the world. Because in his mind, he did. He was 16. His whole life was ahead of him. He could start trying tomorrow, or next week, or next year. There was no urgency, no fire, no reason to pick up the chisel. And then his grandfather came to visit. His grandfather who he hadn't seen in 2 years. And the moment Marcus saw him walk through the door, he knew something was wrong. His grandfather had always been this big, strong presence. Wide shoulders, firm handshake, booming laugh. But the man who walked through that door was smaller somehow. Thinner. Slower. And later that night after dinner, Marcus overheard his parents talking in the kitchen. Stage 4. Months, not years. Make the most of the time we have left. Marcus sat in his room that night, staring at his ceiling, feeling this weight in his chest he didn't know how to name. And the next evening, his grandfather knocked on his door and asked if they could talk, just the two of them. They sat on the back porch watching the sun go down, and his grandfather didn't give him a speech about living life to the fullest. He didn't talk about regrets or bucket list or seizing the day. Instead, he asked Marcus a simple question. If you could go back and redo any year of your life, which one would it be? And Marcus thought about it, and he realized he didn't have an answer. because none of his years had been particularly memorable. They'd all kind of blended together into this gray, comfortable sameness. So he said, probably this one. I haven't really done anything memorable. I'd go back and actually do something with it. And his grandfather looked at him with these devastatingly kind eyes and said something that changed everything. He said, I don't get to go back. But you do. You're living it right now. Today. This hour. This conversation. Are you going to remember this? Or are you going to wish you could redo it too? Marcus couldn't sleep that night. That question kept looping in his mind like a song he couldn't turn off. Are you going to remember today? And he realized with this sick, sinking feeling, no, he wasn't going to remember today. Because today had been like every other day. Wake up, go through the motions, waste hours on things that didn't matter, go to sleep. And tomorrow would be the same. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until one day he'd be 70 years old, looking back and realizing he couldn't remember any of it. That he'd lived an entire life and had nothing to show for it. No stories, no growth, no sculpture. Just an untouched block of marble that he'd walk past every single day. So he did something he'd never done before. He grabbed a notebook and he mapped out how he'd spent that day. Hour by hour, written down on paper where he couldn't ignore it. 7 hours sleeping, 7 hours at school, 1 hour eating, 30 minutes showering and getting ready. That left 8.5 hours. 8.5 hours that were actually his. Hours he could choose what to do with. And where had those hours gone? 4 hours gaming, 2 hours on YouTube, an hour scrolling social media, an hour and a half just lying on his bed staring at his phone doing nothing in particular. He'd had 8.5 hours of freedom, of possibility, of time that was truly his to shape, and he'd spent it on absolutely nothing he'd remember next week, let alone next year. And that's when it hit him like a physical blow to the chest. This wasn't one wasted day. This was how he'd spent every single day for the last 2 years. 730 days. Over 6,000 hours of time that he had control over. Gone. Spent on nothing. And he couldn't get them back. He couldn't go back to 14-year-old Marcus and say, hey, use these hours better. They were just gone. Disappeared into the void. And all he had to show for it was a high score in a video game that didn't matter and a bunch of videos that he'd watched that he couldn't even remember. Marcus didn't become a completely different person that night. He didn't throw out his video games or delete all his apps or suddenly transform into some productivity machine, because that's not how real change works. Real change doesn't happen in dramatic, overnight transformations. It happens in small, repeated decisions that compound over time. So Marcus started small. He decided that every day he wanted to be able to write down one thing he'd remember. Not accomplish, not achieve, just remember. One thing that mattered enough that future Marcus would look back and say, yeah, I'm glad I did that. Some days it was tiny, learning to cook one new recipe so that years from now he could make that dish and remember when he learned it. Some days it was reading 20 pages of a book his grandfather had recommended. Some days it was just going for a walk and actually looking at the sky, feeling the air, being present instead of having his headphones in and his mind somewhere else. And he gave himself 1 hour every day. Just one. 1 hour where he was fully intentional, where he put his phone in another room, where he focused completely on whatever he'd chosen to do with that hour, where he was the author of his time instead of a passenger. And here's what started happening. That one intentional hour started changing how he saw the rest of his hours. Because when you spend 1 hour fully present, fully alive, fully conscious of the fact that this is your life, happening right now, the other hours start to feel different. The 4 hours of gaming started to feel hollow. The endless scrolling started to feel like what it really was, avoiding, running, hiding from the discomfort of becoming someone. 6 months after that conversation with his grandfather, Marcus played guitar at his funeral. He'd spend his intentional hour every day for those 6 months learning. Some days he only practiced for 20 minutes before his fingers hurt and he had to stop. Some days he practiced for 2 hours because he got lost in it. But every single day he showed up. Every single day he chipped away at the marble. And when he stood up in front of his family and played his grandfather's favorite song, when he looked out and saw his mother crying and his father's hand on her shoulder, he knew. He knew that those hours mattered, that he'd used his time to create something his grandfather would never hear, but would somehow, somewhere, know about. And that memory, that moment, it was worth more than all those thousands of hours he'd wasted before. A year after his grandfather died, Marcus started a small business fixing computers for neighbors. He'd always been decent with technology. That's what gamers are, right? People who understand systems. So he took that skill and he turned it into something useful, something that served people, something that made him money and taught him about responsibility and business and human connection. 2 years after that, he was in college on a partial scholarship, working part-time at a tech company, building something real. And when people asked him what changed, he never said, "I stopped being lazy." He said, "I stopped treating my time like it didn't matter." Now, let me tell you a different story, a parable that'll help you understand what Marcus learned. Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and someone has left 2 jars by your bed. The first jar is full of marbles, 86 of them, beautiful, perfect marbles. And there's a note attached that says, each marble represents one of the 1,440 minutes in your day. You can spend these marbles however you want. But here's the rule. Any marble you don't use by midnight disappears forever. You can't save them, you can't bank them for tomorrow, you can't go back and get yesterday's marbles. Use them or lose them. The second jar is empty, completely empty. But it has a label on it that says, "What I built today." And the only way to fill this jar is to intentionally use the marbles from the first jar to create something, a memory, a skill, a connection, a step forward, a moment of true presence, anything that matters, anything that you'd want to keep, anything that makes you more than you were yesterday. Now, here's what most people do with these jars. They wake up tomorrow and they see the first jar full of marbles and they think, wow, 86 marbles, that's a lot, I have plenty. So they spend them carelessly. They drop 10 marbles on the ground while getting ready for work, scrolling through social media while eating breakfast, not really tasting their food, not really present. They throw 20 marbles away during their commute, lost in their head, rehearsing conversations that already happened, or worrying about things that might never happen. They spend 30 marbles at work on autopilot, just going through the motions, watching the clock, waiting for the day to be over. They come home and pour 15 marbles into cooking and eating dinner while simultaneously watching TV and checking their phone, not really doing any of it. And then they dump the remaining marbles, all of them, into scrolling, into Netflix, into numbing, into disappearing into distractions until their eyes finally close and the day is over. And every night, they go to bed and look at the second jar, the jar labeled "What I Built Today," and it's empty, completely empty. And they feel this vague, undefined sadness, this sense that another day just passed and they can't quite remember what they did with it. They can't point to anything and say, that's what I built, that's what I created, that's why today mattered. And they tell themselves, tomorrow I'll do better, tomorrow I'll be more intentional, tomorrow I'll fill the jar. But tomorrow comes and they do the exact same thing, and the next day, and the next, until years have passed and they've gone through thousands of jars of marbles, and the second jar has maybe a few pebbles in it. Maybe. And they wonder why life feels so empty, why nothing ever changes, why they feel like they're running out of time. But then there are the people who understand the game. They wake up and they see those 86 marbles and they feel the weight of them. They know these are all they get today. They know yesterday's marbles are gone forever. They know tomorrow's marbles haven't been given yet. So they're conscious, they're intentional, they choose, and they look at the first jar and they think, how do I want to spend these? What matters enough to deserve these marbles? And they don't spend every marble perfectly. They don't optimize every minute. They waste some for rest, some for fun, some for just being. But they're awake, they're present, they're choosing, and every day they make sure that some of those marbles, even if it's just 10, even if it's just 5, go into the second jar, into building something, learning something, connecting with someone, creating a memory, becoming someone slightly different than who they were when they woke up. And slowly, day by day, marble by marble, that second jar fills. And that jar becomes their life. That jar becomes a sculpture. That jar becomes proof that they were here,
that they mattered, that they used their time to create something worth keeping.
And here's what you need to understand. Time isn't just passing, it's being spent. Every moment you're unconscious about how you spend it is a moment you're choosing to leave the jar empty. Every hour you waste is an hour you're choosing not to build with. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not this year, but one day, you're going to run out of marbles. The jar is going to stop refilling, and the only thing you'll have left is whatever you put in that second jar, whatever you built, whatever you created, whatever you became. And in that moment, you'll either look at a jar full of memories and meaning and growth, or you'll look at an empty jar and wish you could go back. So let me break down what Marcus learned, what those marbles teach us. First truth, laziness is not doing nothing. Laziness is doing easy things to avoid hard things. Marcus wasn't doing nothing in his room. He was gaming, scrolling, watching, consuming. He was busy, he was occupied, but he was avoiding the discomfort of trying, avoiding the risk of failing, avoiding the work of becoming someone. Laziness is your mind's way of protecting you from discomfort, from failure, from judgment, from change. But here's the paradox. Avoiding discomfort creates the deepest discomfort of all, the feeling that your life is slipping away, the feeling that you're wasting the one precious life you've been given. The cure for laziness isn't discipline. It's facing what you're avoiding and doing it anyway. One small step at a time. Second truth. Time isn't a resource. It's your life in disguise. We talk about having time or making time like it's something separate from us, like it's this abstract thing we can manage or manipulate, but time is your life, literally. The hours you have left are the life you have left. When you waste time, you're not just being unproductive, you're giving away pieces of your existence that you'll never get back. Think about that. Really think about it. When Marcus spent 4 hours gaming, he didn't just waste 4 hours, he spent 4 hours of his life. 4 hours he will never see again, 4 hours that are now gone forever. And what did he get in return? A temporary escape, a brief distraction, nothing that lasted, nothing that built, nothing that mattered. Once you see time this way, everything changes. Procrastination becomes self-betrayal, distraction becomes self-harm. And using time wisely becomes self-love. It becomes the most important way you show yourself respect, the most important way you honor the gift of being alive. Third truth, you don't need more time. You need more intention. Everyone gets 24 hours. Marcus got 24 hours. Elon Musk gets 24 hours. Your neighbor who's building an incredible life gets 24 hours. You get 24 hours. The difference between someone who builds a life they're proud of and someone who drifts isn't the amount of time. It's the consciousness with which they use it. One intentional hour is worth more than 10 distracted ones. 1 hour where you're fully present, fully engaged, fully alive is worth more than an entire day spent on autopilot. Stop asking, how can I find more time? Start asking, what matters enough to deserve my time today? Because when you get clear on what actually matters, when you get clear on what you want to build, what you want to become, what you want to remember, suddenly you have plenty of time. You just stop wasting it on things that don't deserve it. Fourth truth, tiny choices compound. One wasted hour doesn't feel significant. You can waste an hour and go to bed and think, well, tomorrow I'll do better. No big deal. But one wasted hour every day for a year is 365 hours. That's over 15 full days of your life, spent on nothing you'll remember. Now multiply that by 10 years, 150 days, 20 years, 300 days, almost an entire year of your life gone if you waste just 1 hour per day for 20 years. The people who live extraordinary lives aren't working harder, they're not working longer, they're just making slightly better choices with their hours. And they're letting those choices compound over time. Marcus didn't become successful because he suddenly started working 18-hour days. He became successful because he started making one intentional hour count, and then another, and then another. And over months and years, those hours compounded into a completely different life. Success isn't built in massive leaps. It's built in small, unsexy, repeated decisions to use the next hour well. Fifth truth. Using time wisely doesn't mean being busy. This is the trap so many people fall into. They think using time wisely means hustling, grinding, never stopping, always producing. But that's not wisdom. That's burnout waiting to happen. Rest is wise. Presence is wise. Doing nothing with intention is wise. The question isn't, am I being productive? The question is, am I being intentional? Marcus watching a movie with his family because he chose to be present with them, to create a memory, to connect. That's wise use of time. Marcus scrolling for 3 hours because he's avoiding his homework, avoiding his life, avoiding himself. That's waste. The difference isn't the activity, it's the consciousness behind it. So how do you actually change? How do you go from being someone who wastes time to someone who uses it wisely? Let me give you the exact practices that work for Marcus. First practice, the daily marble count. Every morning when you wake up, write down the number 24 on a piece of paper. Those are your hours. Those are your marbles. And as you go through your day, put a check mark next to each hour you spent intentionally, where you were present, purposeful, conscious. Don't judge yourself, just notice. By the end of the week, you'll see a pattern. You'll see where your time is actually going. And awareness always precedes change. You can't manage what you don't measure. You can't redirect what you can't see. Second practice, the 1 hour rule. Pick 1 hour today, just one, and decide in advance what you want to remember about it. Maybe it's 7 to 8 p.m. Write down, this hour I'm going to learn to cook a new recipe. Tomorrow I'll remember I did this. Or this hour I'm going to read. This hour I'm going to call my grandmother. This hour I'm going to work on my project. Whatever it is, write it down, then protect that hour like it's sacred. Turn off your phone, close the distractions, be fully present. This isn't about productivity, this is about proving to yourself that you can be intentional, that you can be the author of your time, not a passenger. 1 hour a day where you're awake, where you're choosing, where you're building. Third practice, the evening review. Before you go to bed, ask yourself 3 questions. What did I do today that I'll remember? What did I waste time on that I won't? If I could redo today, what would I change? Write it down, 2 minutes, that's all. This practice creates a feedback loop. It shows you where your time went, what mattered, what didn't. And over time, you'll naturally start making better choices because you're conscious of the cost, because you don't want to write down that you wasted another day. Fourth practice, the future me filter. Before you start any activity, especially something that's going to take a long time, ask yourself one question. Will the version of me 6 months from now be grateful I spent time on this? If the answer is yes, do it. If the answer is no, reconsider. This question cuts through immediate gratification. It forces you to think long term. Your future self is counting on your current self to use time wisely. Don't let them down.
So here's where we've been. You came into this video maybe seeing yourself in Marcus. Maybe you've been calling yourself lazy for years. Maybe you've been watching your life pass by, knowing you could be doing more, being more, but not knowing how to start. And what I hope you're walking away with is this profound truth. You were never lazy. You were just unconscious. You were treating time like it was infinite, like you could always start tomorrow, like the hours didn't really matter. But they do matter, every single one, because time isn't separate from your life. It is your life. And every hour you spend unconsciously, every day you let slip by without intention, is a piece of yourself you're giving away to nothing. Not to something meaningful, not to someone you love, to nothing. Marcus's transformation didn't happen because he became more disciplined. It happened because he woke up. Because one conversation with his dying grandfather made him see what had been invisible his whole life. That the marble was real. That the chisel was in his hand. That the sculpture was possible. But only if he started. Only if he picked up the tool and began. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to wasting time without feeling it in your chest, without knowing, deep down, that you're betraying the most important person in your life, your future self. Using time wisely isn't about becoming a productivity machine. It's not about hustling every hour or never resting or grinding yourself into exhaustion. It's about being awake. It's about choosing. It's about looking at your 24 hours and saying, these are all I have today. How do I want to spend them? What do I want to remember about this day? And then acting on that answer, not perfectly, just intentionally. Here's your mantra. Say it with me. My time is my life, and I will not give my life to things that don't matter. Say it again. I am not lazy. I am learning to be intentional, and intention changes everything. One more time. Every hour is a choice, and today I'm choosing to matter. You don't need to change everything tomorrow. You don't need to become someone you're not. You just need to take 1 hour today, one single hour, and use it with full presence, full intention, full consciousness. And tomorrow, do it again. And the day after that, do it again. And slowly, hour by hour, day by day, you'll build a life worth remembering. Not because you worked harder, but because you lived more awake. And if this story landed for you, if you felt something shift, if you saw yourself in Marcus, if this is the wake-up call you've been needing, let me know. Hit the like button, not for me, for you, as a commitment, as a promise to your future self that you're done sleepwalking through your hours. Drop a comment and tell me what's the one thing you're going to do with your time today that you'll actually remember tomorrow. Make it real, make it public, make it matter. And subscribe if you want more stories like this, more truth, more transformation, more reminders that your life is happening right now, in this moment, and you get to decide what you do with it. You've got this, not because you're suddenly going to become perfect, but because you're finally going to become intentional. And intentional living, that's where everything changes. Now go, use your next hour wisely. Your future self is watching. Make him proud.